What if I told you that everything you've been taught about family, about loyalty, about what you're owed, is a lie? What if the people closest to you, the ones you'd bleed for, are secretly laughing as they pick your pockets clean? My name is Evelyn, and for years I lived that lie. I was a fool, a walking ATM, convinced that my kindness was being returned, that my sacrifices were seen. I was wrong, terribly, painfully wrong. For decades I poured every ounce of my being into building a life, a home, a future. I worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, sacrificing nights out, new clothes, even proper meals. While my friends were buying fancy cars and taking exotic vacations, I was meticulously saving, pinching every penny, dreaming of the day I'd finally own something outright, something truly mine. My ultimate goal? A small, quiet house in Arizona, a place where I could finally breathe, where I could be free. It was a simple dream, born from a lifetime of struggle. My younger sister Brenda, however, had a different approach to life. Brenda believed in living large, living now, and living off of me. She saw my savings not as my hard-earned security, but as her personal emergency fund, her endless well of cash. Every month, without fail, Brenda would call, a new crisis always at hand. Her car broke down, her rent was due, her cat needed emergency surgery. Each time, I'd open my wallet, my heart aching for her, believing I was doing the right thing, helping family. I never asked for repayment, never even considered it. Family helps family, right? That was my mantra, my unwavering belief. Then, the unthinkable happened. My landlord, a sweet old woman named Mrs. Henderson, passed away unexpectedly. Her greedy nephew immediately took over, hiking the rent by an astronomical amount. I was devastated. The small apartment I'd called home for 15 years, the place filled with memories, was suddenly out of my reach. I had to move, and fast. The timing couldn't have been worse. I was so close to my house down payment, but this sudden upheaval threatened to derail everything. I confided in Brenda, explaining my predicament, the panic rising in my throat. I told her I had nowhere to go, that my dream was slipping away. Her response? A shrug, a casual, almost indifferent shrug. She told me, "Well, you always have a place here, Ev. Just pay me what you were paying Mrs. Henderson, and you can stay in the spare room." My heart swelled with relief. My sister, my lifeline. She was saving me. I moved in, grateful beyond words, and every month, without question, I handed her a check for the full amount I'd been paying for my own apartment. I thought it was fair, a temporary arrangement until I could find my own place. I was paying my way, contributing to her household, just like family should. For 2 years, I lived in that spare room, working harder than ever, scrimping and saving every spare dime. I ate instant noodles, wore worn-out clothes, and drove a car held together with duct tape. Every time I handed Brenda that check, a small part of me hoped she'd say, "Don't worry about it this month, Ev." Your family. But she never did. Not once. She just took the money always. I convinced myself it was just her way. That she needed it. That she was struggling too. After all, she was always complaining about money. The resentment began to fester, a slow, corrosive burn beneath the surface. I was working myself to the bone, living in a glorified closet, while she seemed to be doing just fine, always with new gadgets, new clothes, going out to expensive restaurants. But I pushed it down, reminding myself of my dream, of that house in Arizona. That dream was my North Star, the only thing keeping me going. Then came the day that shattered my world into a million pieces. A seemingly innocent conversation with a mutual friend, Sarah, turned into a gut-wrenching revelation. Sarah mentioned how lucky Brenda was to have such a generous sister, always helping her out with her mortgage. Mortgage? Brenda didn't have a mortgage. She'd inherited her house outright from our parents years ago, free and clear. My blood ran cold. The spare room, the rent. It all clicked into place with a sickening thud. She hadn't needed my money. She had been charging me rent, not to cover her expenses, but to line her own pockets, to fund her lavish lifestyle, while I sacrificed everything. She was living free, and I was paying for it. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow, leaving me breathless, hollowed out. Everything I thought I knew about my sister, about our bond, crumbled to dust. My trust, my love, my sacrifices, she had seen them as opportunities, not as acts of kindness. This wasn't just about money, it was about a profound, calculated deception that had mocked my efforts, my dreams, my very existence. The resentment that had simmered for so long erupted into a raging inferno, consuming every other emotion. I lay awake that night, the truth a bitter taste in my mouth, the weight of her deceit crushing me. But amidst the pain, a new feeling began to stir, cold and clear. It wasn't just anger, it was a fierce, unwavering resolve. I had been a victim for too long. I had been taken for granted, used and discarded. But no more. This wasn't just about getting my money back. It was about reclaiming my dignity, about showing her and myself that I was not a fool to be exploited. I would not just survive, I would thrive. And the way I would do it, the way I would finally buy that house in Arizona, would be the ultimate undeniable proof that my kindness was not weakness. What happened next would change everything. Not just for me, but for Brenda too. The sterile white walls of the apartment had become a cage, each month tightening its grip. I was Evelyn, just barely 24, and the weight of my sister's presence, or rather, her lack of presence, pressed down on me more with each passing day. For 3 years, I had dutifully paid the full rent for our 2-bedroom apartment in downtown Phoenix, a place we'd moved into together with so much hope. My half, a hefty $900, was always on time, every single month. Her half, the other $900, was a ghost. My sister, Sarah, was supposed to be my partner in this adulting adventure. Instead, she was a phantom roommate, a name on a lease who rarely contributed anything beyond an occasional half-hearted apology. She'd flit in and out, sometimes staying for a week, sometimes a month, leaving a trail of forgotten clothes and empty promises. "I'll get it to you next week, Ev," she'd say, her voice airy, her eyes never quite meeting mine. "Just had a little hiccup with my hours." Those hiccups, I realized much too late, were chronic. I worked 2 jobs, a barista in the mornings and a freelance graphic designer in the evenings, just to cover our combined expenses. My life was a relentless cycle of early mornings, caffeine-fueled afternoons, and late-night design work, all while Sarah was out living her best life, whatever that meant. My friends, bless their hearts, would try to intervene. "Evelyn, you're being taken advantage of." Maria, my closest confidant, would state plainly over lukewarm coffee. "She's your sister, but this isn't fair to you." I knew it wasn't fair, deep down, but the thought of confronting Sarah, of shattering the fragile peace, felt insurmountable. The resentment, however, was a slow-burning fire, charring the edges of my patience. Then came the day I overheard her on the phone, a hushed conversation from her rarely used bedroom. I was making dinner, the sizzle of vegetables in the pan masking her voice until a lull in the kitchen noise. "Honestly, I don't even know why Evelyn bothers working so hard." She giggled into the phone. "It's like, she just loves paying for everything. Free rent, free utilities. It's basically a vacation for me." The words hit me like a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. Free rent. A vacation. While I was sacrificing my youth, my sleep, my very sanity, she saw it as a free ride. My hands trembled, the spatula clattering against the stovetop. The resentment I'd been trying to suppress erupted into a searing anger. I retreated to my room, the sound of her continued chatter a grating symphony of betrayal. It wasn't just about the money anymore, it was about the utter disregard, the casual cruelty of her words. She wasn't just flaky, she was actively, deliberately exploiting me. The vision of her carefree laughter, juxtaposed with my exhaustion, painted a stark picture of our reality. I stared at my reflection in the darkened window, seeing not Evelyn, the hard-working sister, but Evelyn, the naive fool. That night, sleep was a distant dream. My mind raced, replaying every skipped payment, every vague excuse, every time I'd be gone without something I needed so Sarah could maintain her illusion of a life. The apartment, once a symbol of our shared future, now felt like a monument to my own foolishness. I thought of my parents, always encouraging us to support each other, to be there for family. They'd instilled in me a deep sense of loyalty, a value Sarah seemed to have conveniently forgotten. The next morning, a Saturday, I found Sarah lounging on the sofa, scrolling through her phone, a half-eaten bowl of cereal beside her. The sun streamed in, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, and for a moment, everything felt eerily normal. But it wasn't. Not anymore. I walked past her, grabbed my keys, and headed out without a word. My destination was a small, independent coffee shop on the other side of town, a place I rarely visited, needing the distance, the anonymity. I sat there for hours, nursing a single cup of black coffee, a notebook open before me. My thoughts, once a tangled mess of anger and hurt, slowly began to coalesce into something sharper, more focused. This wasn't just about getting my money back. This was about reclaiming my life, my dignity. The idea, initially a whisper, grew into a roar in my mind. I needed a plan, a way to break free from this financial and emotional stranglehold. I started to sketch out a budget, meticulously detailing every penny I earned, every penny I spent. The numbers stared back at me, a stark reminder of how much I was sacrificing. As the afternoon wore on, a new, audacious thought began to form. What if I didn't just break even? What if I aimed for something bigger, something that would not only free me but also send an undeniable message? The thought of buying my own place, a small, modest home, something entirely mine, started to take root. It felt impossible, a pipe dream given my current situation. Yet, the image of Sarah's smug face, her casual dismissal of my efforts, fueled a fierce determination I hadn't known I possessed. This wasn't just about escape. It was about a profound shift. A declaration of independence. This was about Evelyn finally taking control. The whisper of Sarah's voice, though muffled, carried a chilling clarity. Honestly, I don't know why Evelyn even bothers. It's not like she's going anywhere. The words were a physical blow, a cold, hard truth that landed squarely in my chest. Not going anywhere. Was that how she saw me? Trapped? Stagnant? A convenient ATM for her endless whims? The resentment that had been a slow burn ignited into a furious blaze. My hands trembled as I continued to chop vegetables, the rhythmic thudding of the knife against the cutting board echoing the frantic beat of my heart. She wasn't just taking advantage of me, she was mocking my very existence. That night, sleep was a distant luxury. Every creak of the apartment building, every distant siren, seemed to amplify her cruel words. I tossed and turned, replaying countless instances of her casual disregard, her airy promises, her phantom presence. The memory of her on the phone, her voice laced with such dismissive contempt, gnawed at me. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about respect, about dignity, about the fundamental right to not be treated as a doormat in my own home. A resolve began to harden within me, a steely determination that pushed aside the familiar fear of confrontation. This couldn't continue. I couldn't continue to be Evelyn, the ever-sacrificing sister. The next morning, the air in the apartment felt thick with unspoken tension. Sarah, oblivious, or perhaps expertly feigning ignorance, breezed into the kitchen, humming a tuneless melody. She poured herself a cup of coffee, the aroma doing little to soothe my frayed nerves. "Morning, Ev," she chirped, her smile saccharine. "Anything exciting planned for today?" Her casual tone, her complete lack of awareness, was infuriating. I swallowed the bitter retort that threatened to escape, choosing instead to focus on the small, modest home that had begun to take root in my imagination. It was more than a house. It was a sanctuary, a fortress against her parasitic presence. The idea, once a fleeting fantasy, now consumed my every waking moment. I started researching, devouring articles on first-time homebuyer programs, interest rates, and down payments. Every spare minute was spent poring over listings, envisioning myself in a space that was truly mine. The numbers were daunting, a mountain of debt that felt insurmountable. But the image of Sarah's smug face, her casual dismissal of my efforts, fueled a fierce determination I hadn't known I possessed. This wasn't just about escape, it was about a profound shift, a declaration of independence. This was about Evelyn finally taking control. My 2 jobs, once a means to an end, became instruments of my liberation. I picked up extra shifts at the coffee shop, the early morning grind a welcome distraction from the simmering anger. My freelance graphic design work, once a creative outlet, transformed into a relentless pursuit of profit. I took on every project, no matter how small or mundane, working late into the night, fueled by cheap coffee and the burning desire for freedom. The exhaustion was bone deep, a constant companion, but it was a different kind of tired, a purposeful, driven exhaustion. Each dollar earned was a brick laid in the foundation of my future home, a step further away from Sarah's suffocating shadow. The apartment, once our shared space, began to feel like a battleground. Sarah, sensing a shift in my demeanor, though perhaps not understanding its cause, grew increasingly irritable. She'd leave her dirty dishes piled high in the sink, her laundry scattered across the living room floor, pushing the boundaries, testing my patience. Each transgression was a deliberate act, a silent challenge. I met them with a cold, unwavering resolve, cleaning up after her without a word, my silence a more potent weapon than any argument. The tension between us was a palpable thing, a heavy blanket that smothered any pretense of sisterly affection. One evening, I received a call from Maria. "Evelyn, you sound different," she observed, her voice tinged with concern. "What's going on?" I hesitated, then poured out everything, the overheard conversation, the gnawing resentment, the fierce new dream. Maria listened patiently, her quiet support a balm to my raw emotions. "You deserve this, Ev," she said finally, her voice firm. "You deserve your own space, your own peace." Her words were a confirmation, a validation of the path I was now so determinedly on. The dream of a house, once a whispered hope, solidified into a concrete plan, a weapon forged in the fires of betrayal. The hunt for a house became an obsession. Every weekend was spent driving through neighborhoods, attending open houses, my heart leaping with each promising listing, then sinking with each disappointment. The market was brutal, and my budget was tight. There were moments of despair, moments when the dream felt impossibly out of reach, when the sheer magnitude of the task threatened to overwhelm me. But then, I'd remember Sarah's dismissive words, her casual cruelty, and the anger would reignite, pushing me forward. This wasn't just about a house, it was about proving her wrong, about reclaiming my narrative. Then, one sweltering Tuesday afternoon, a notification popped up on my phone. A small, unassuming bungalow in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood. The pictures were modest, almost plain, but something about it called to me. It was within my price range, a miracle in itself. I scheduled a viewing for the very next day, my heart thrumming with a cautious optimism. This was it, I told myself. This was the beginning of the end of Sarah's reign. The air crackled with anticipation, a feeling I hadn't experienced in years. The resentment was still there, a constant companion, but now it was tempered with a powerful sense of purpose. I was no longer just reacting to Sarah, I was actively building my escape, brick by painstaking brick. This was about more than just finding a house, it was about finding myself again, free from her suffocating grip. The whispers about Sarah's true intentions had started subtly, like a faint echo in a cavern, but they grew louder with each passing week. It wasn't just Maria anymore, other friends, people who had known Sarah and me for years, began to voice their concerns. "She told me she's planning a trip to Miami next month," one friend mentioned casually, unaware of the financial tightrope I walked daily. "Said she's been saving up." The words hit me like a physical blow, a cold, hard knot forming in my stomach. Saving up? For a trip to Miami? While I worked 2 jobs to keep a roof over our heads, a roof she rarely occupied, Sarah was apparently squirreling away money for lavish vacations. A chilling realization began to dawn on me. This wasn't just irresponsibility, it was a calculated manipulation. Sarah wasn't struggling, she was thriving, off my efforts, off my blind loyalty. The resentment, which had been a slow burn, now flared into a raging inferno. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the profound betrayal, the shattering of a trust I hadn't even realized I'd placed so completely in her. My sister, the person I had defended, supported, and sacrificed for, was actively deceiving me. The apartment, once a symbol of our shared future, now felt like a stage for her elaborate performance. Every time Sarah glided in, radiating an air of carefree contentment, a fresh wave of anger washed over me. Her casual inquiries about my day, her feigned sympathy when I mentioned being tired from work, all felt like a mockery. I started to see through her charade, noticing the new clothes, the expensive coffee she'd bring home, the subtle glow of someone who wasn't constantly stressed about bills. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place, forming a picture of a sister who was not just taking advantage, but actively exploiting me. My search for a house became an obsession, a desperate race against time and against Sarah's insidious hold. I spent every spare moment poring over listings, driving through neighborhoods, imagining a life where my financial stability wasn't contingent on her whims. The idea of owning my own space, a sanctuary where I wouldn't have to brace myself for her next excuse or her next lavish purchase, became my driving force. It wasn't just about escape, it was about reclaiming my dignity, my agency. One evening, I found myself in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood on the outskirts of Mesa, far from the bustling downtown I shared with Sarah. A small, unassuming house with a "for sale by owner" sign caught my eye. It was older, a little worn, but it had good bones and a generous backyard. The price, listed clearly, was surprisingly within reach, especially if I could secure a good loan. A flicker of hope, brighter than any I'd felt in years, ignited within me. This wasn't just a house. It was a declaration of independence. I called the number on the sign, my heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. The owner, a kind elderly woman named Mrs. Henderson, agreed to show me the house that very weekend. Walking through the empty rooms, I envisioned my own furniture, my own artwork, a life free from the constant anxiety Sarah imposed. The air in that house felt different, lighter, untainted by her presence. I saw myself gardening in the backyard, hosting friends, simply existing without the crushing weight of someone else's irresponsibility. The thought of Sarah's reaction, however, loomed in the back of my mind. How would she respond when I told her I was leaving, that her free ride was over? The anticipation of that confrontation was a constant gnawing worry, yet it also fueled my determination. This wasn't just about finding a new place, it was about standing up for myself, for the first time in years, against the person who had chipped away at my self-worth. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but the alternative, remaining trapped in her web of deceit, was far worse. I was building my fortress, one step at a time, and nothing, not even Sarah, would stop me. The scent of fresh paint and new beginnings filled my small apartment. I'd spent every spare moment after work transforming the space, painting over the sterile white with warm, inviting colors, hanging shelves, and arranging the few pieces of furniture I owned. Each brushstroke was a defiant act, a tangible step away from the suffocating resentment that had defined my life with Sarah. This wasn't just a place to live. It was my sanctuary, a fortress against the emotional drain she represented. I had meticulously budgeted, saved every extra dollar, And finally, after months of relentless effort, I had enough for a down payment. The feeling of signing those papers, of having a key to my own front door, was exhilarating, a profound sense of accomplishment I hadn't felt in years. I still hadn't told Sarah about my plans. The thought of her reaction, the inevitable drama, gnawed at me, but I pushed it aside. This was about me, about reclaiming my life. The apartment, though modest, felt like a palace. I reveled in the quiet, the freedom to leave a dish in the sink without guilt, to decorate exactly as I pleased. I worked tirelessly, not just at my jobs but on myself. Therapy sessions helped me untangle the years of emotional manipulation, giving me the tools to set boundaries and understand my own worth. I started saying no more often, prioritizing my own needs over others' demands. The transformation wasn't just external, it was deeply internal. Then came the text, a casual message from Sarah. "Hey, can you cover my half of rent this month?" My hours got cut. My stomach clenched, a familiar knot of dread and anger. For a split second, the old Evelyn, the one who would sigh and reluctantly agree, resurfaced. But then I looked around my new home, at the vibrant walls, the sun streaming through the window, and a wave of resolve washed over me. I typed out a response, my fingers trembling slightly. "No, Sarah, I can't." The phone rang instantly, her voice laced with incredulity. "What do you mean you can't? You always do. Things are different now, Sarah," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I'm not paying your share anymore." A beat of silence, then a sharp, disbelieving laugh. "Are you serious? Where am I supposed to get the money?" "You know I'm struggling." "That's not my responsibility," I replied, the words feeling liberating as they left my lips. "You need to figure it out." The conversation escalated quickly, her disbelief morphing into anger, then into accusations. She called me selfish, ungrateful, reminding me of every perceived favor she'd ever done for me. It was a familiar script, one I'd heard countless times before, but this time, it didn't hold the same power. I listened, letting her words wash over me without penetrating the shield I'd built. When she paused for breath, I calmly informed her that I was moving out. The news hit her like a physical blow. "Moving out? Where are you going? What about the lease?" Her tone shifted from anger to panic. The reality of her situation, of having to face the full financial burden alone, was dawning on her. I explained that I had found a new place, that I had already given notice, and that she would be solely responsible for the rent from next month onward. I watched, almost dispassionately, as her world began to crumble. The years of my silent sacrifice, of my enabling her irresponsible behavior, were finally coming to an end. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening, filled with the weight of her dawning realization. This wasn't just about money. It was about the comfortable life I had unwittingly provided, a life she now had to face without me. The next few weeks were a blur of packing boxes and severing ties. Sarah's calls became increasingly desperate, pleading, cajoling, even threatening. She tried to guilt-trip me, reminding me of our childhood, of family loyalty. Each attempt was a fresh wound, but also a reinforcement of my decision. I knew I was doing the right thing. The move itself was cathartic. Each box I carried out of the old apartment felt like shedding a layer of my past. I returned the keys to the landlord, a final decisive act. The weight that had pressed down on me for years finally lifted. I was free. I settled into my new apartment, embracing the solitude and the peace. My life was finally my own. I worked, I designed, I explored my new neighborhood, all without the constant anxiety of Sarah's demands. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly happy. Then, a few weeks later, an envelope arrived in the mail. It was a formal letter from the landlord of our old apartment, addressed to both Sarah and me. My heart pounded as I opened it. It was an eviction notice, citing unpaid rent for the current month. Sarah hadn't paid a single dime, and attached to it, a demand for the full amount, plus late fees, and a notice that our credit scores would be severely impacted. The storm, it seemed, had only just begun. My blood ran cold as I reread the eviction notice. It wasn't just an eviction, it was a demand for every penny Sarah owed, plus a mountain of late fees, threatening to crater both our credit scores. This wasn't some minor hiccup, this was a financial apocalypse, orchestrated entirely by her. The resentment, which had been a slow burn, now roared into an inferno. My sister, my own flesh and blood, had not only betrayed my trust, but was now actively sabotaging my future. The thought of confronting Sarah, once an insurmountable fear, now felt like an urgent, vital necessity. There was no more peace to shatter, only a war to be waged. I found Sarah sprawled on the couch, scrolling through her phone, utterly oblivious to the impending disaster. The eviction notice lay on the coffee table between us, a stark white testament to her deceit. My voice, when I finally spoke, was a low, controlled tremor. "Sarah, we need to talk." She barely glanced up, a dismissive hum her only reply. "This just arrived," I continued, pushing the letter towards her. Her eyes finally flickered to the document, then back to her phone, a casual shrug her only reaction. "Oh, that? Yeah, I meant to tell you. Just a little behind on rent." "A little behind?" My carefully constructed world was crumbling, and she called it a little behind. The words were out before I could stop them, a torrent of years of suppressed anger and frustration. "A little behind, Sarah? You haven't paid a dime in months. I've been covering your half, my half, and now they're evicting us. Our credit scores are going to be ruined because of your little hiccups." Her phone clattered to the floor, her eyes finally wide with something akin to shock, though I suspected it was more annoyance at being interrupted than genuine concern. "What are you talking about, Evelyn? I told you I'd pay you back. It's not my fault if the landlord is being unreasonable." The audacity of her statement stole my breath. Unreasonable? She was the architect of this entire mess. Unreasonable? "Sarah, you've been living rent-free for 3 years, spending every penny on God knows what, while I've worked myself to the bone to keep a roof over our heads. This isn't about the landlord. This is about you and your complete disregard for anyone but yourself." Her face, usually so placid, contorted into a mask of indignation. "Oh, so now it's all my fault? You always act like you're so perfect, Evelyn. Maybe if you weren't so uptight all the time, you'd understand." That was it. The last shred of sisterly affection, of any hope for understanding, dissolved in that moment. "I understand perfectly, Sarah. I understand that you're a parasite, living off my hard work and destroying everything I've built. But not anymore." My voice was firm, unwavering. "I'm not paying another cent for you. You want to ruin your credit? Go right ahead. But you're not dragging me down with you." I watched as her eyes narrowed, a flicker of genuine fear finally replacing her usual nonchalance. She knew then that something fundamental had shifted. The next few weeks were a blur of frantic phone calls and desperate negotiations. I managed to convince the landlord to remove my name from the eviction notice, agreeing to pay my half of the outstanding rent, but only my half. It was a painful concession, essentially paying for Sarah's past freeloading, but it was a necessary evil to protect my credit. The landlord, surprisingly understanding, explained that Sarah had told him I would cover everything, a lie that twisted the knife even deeper. Each time I spoke to him, he would ask about Sarah's payment, and each time I had to explain that I was no longer responsible for her debts. The shame of it burned, but the resolve to protect myself burned brighter. Sarah, meanwhile, was a whirlwind of denial and desperate pleas. She alternated between tearful apologies and angry accusations, each one ringing hollow. "Please, Evelyn, you have to help me. Where am I going to go?" she'd wail, as if I were the one who had put her in this predicament. My heart, once so easily swayed by her crocodile tears, remained cold. "That's your problem, Sarah. You made your bed, now you have to lie in it." The words felt harsh, but they were true, and for the first time in years, I felt a sense of liberation in speaking my truth. Then came the day I received the bank statement. It detailed the final payment for my new house, the one I had secretly been saving for, the one that represented my escape. The moment I saw the zero balance, a wave of triumph washed over me. I owned a home, outright, in cash. No mortgage, no landlord, no Sarah. It was a tangible symbol of my independence, a fortress built with my own 2 hands and years of sacrifice. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Sarah was facing eviction, I was becoming a homeowner. I printed the statement, tucked it into an envelope, and left it on the kitchen counter, right next to a moving box I had intentionally left open. Inside the box, a few of Sarah's forgotten belongings lay haphazardly. I knew she'd see it, and I knew the message it would send. It wasn't about gloating, it was about drawing a line in the sand, a definitive end to her parasitic existence in my life. The storm, which had threatened to drown me, had finally broken, and I was standing on solid ground, ready to rebuild. My resolve, once a flickering candle, now burned like a bonfire. The decision to buy the house, to sever ties with Sarah, had been the catalyst. It was a conscious choice to reclaim my life, to stop being the victim in a narrative she had so carelessly orchestrated. Ed. The little box, left conspicuously open, held more than just her forgotten trinkets. It held the remnants of a relationship I was finally ready to discard. I had spent years walking on eggshells, fearing her reactions, but that fear had finally calcified into determination. The call came 2 days later, just as I was unpacking the last of my kitchen boxes in my new home. My phone buzzed with Sarah's name, and for the first time, I didn't feel a pang of dread. Instead, a quiet sense of readiness settled over me. Her voice, usually laced with a deceptive sweetness, was sharp, edged with fury. "Evelyn, what is this? What have you done?" I took a deep breath, the scent of fresh paint and new beginnings filling my lungs. "I moved out, Sarah. I bought my own place." A stunned silence stretched between us. Then her voice exploded. "You bought a house? How? And you just left, without telling me? What about the apartment? What about our lease?" Her questions tumbled out, a frantic cascade of accusations. She sounded genuinely bewildered, as if the world had inexplicably shifted beneath her feet. The audacity of her indignation was almost comical. She, who had systematically drained me, now felt personally affronted by my independence. "The lease is up next month, Sarah," I stated calmly, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "I've been covering your half for 3 years, remember? I think it's time you started covering your own." "My half? What are you talking about? We agreed I'd pay when I could." Her voice rose to a shrill pitch, a familiar manipulation tactic she'd used countless times. But this time, it landed flat. This time, I wasn't the naive younger sister, desperate for her approval. "No, Sarah, we agreed we'd split it evenly." "And you never did." Not once. The words, once so difficult to utter, now flowed freely, carrying the weight of years of suppressed resentment. "I've been working 2 jobs, Evelyn, just to keep us afloat, while you were out living your life, oblivious." There was another pause, longer this time, filled with her ragged breathing. "You're just going to abandon me?" The victim card, played for the final time. "I'm not abandoning you, Sarah. I'm choosing myself." For once, the truth of it resonated deep within me, a powerful, liberating chord. "I've covered your half of the rent for 3 years. That's over $30,000, Sarah. $30,000 I worked my fingers to the bone for, while you enjoyed a free ride." The line went dead. She had hung up. I didn't call back. I didn't feel the need to. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was filled with a profound sense of peace. The storm which had threatened to drown me had finally broken, and I was standing on solid ground, ready to rebuild. A week later, a registered letter arrived. It was from the landlord, addressed to Sarah. I knew what it was without opening it, an eviction notice. She had been unable to pay her portion, of course. I felt a pang, not of guilt, but of something akin to sadness for the sister I had lost, the sister who had chosen this path. But the sadness was fleeting, quickly replaced by the quiet strength that had been building within me. I never heard from Sarah again, not directly. Our mutual friends, a few months later, mentioned she had moved back in with our parents, a familiar pattern repeating itself. They spoke of her with pity, a stark contrast to the exasperation that had once colored their voices when discussing my predicament. I had chosen to break the cycle, to step out of the shadow she cast. My new house, small but entirely mine, became a sanctuary. Each nail I hammered, each wall I painted, was a testament to my newfound independence. The financial burden was gone, replaced by the quiet satisfaction of ownership. I still worked hard, but now, every dollar I earned was for me, for my future, not to subsidize someone else's irresponsibility. The bitterness that had gnawed at me for so long began to recede, replaced by a quiet confidence. The journey had been long, painful, and at times isolating, but standing in my own living room, looking out at the small garden I was cultivating, I knew it had all been worth it. The resentment had fueled my escape, the betrayal had solidified my resolve, and the obsession with finding a way out had led me to this moment of justice. It was a bittersweet closure, the end of a chapter with my sister, but the beginning of a new, empowering story for myself. I had learned the hard way that sometimes the only way to save yourself is to let go of what's holding you back, even if it's family. And in doing so, I had finally found my peace. The gavel's sharp crack echoed through the courtroom, a sound that finally severed the last thread connecting me to that toxic past. Judgment for the plaintiff, the judge declared, his voice cutting through the tension that had hung heavy in the air for months. Sarah, her face a mask of disbelief, watched as her carefully constructed world crumbled around her. The years of manipulation, the casual cruelty, the insidious way she had bled my family dry, it all culminated in this single undeniable moment of justice. A wave of something akin to exhaustion washed over me, but beneath it, a profound sense of relief began to unfurl. The lawsuit had been a grueling ordeal, a battle fought not just in court but in the trenches of my own memory. Every deposition, every piece of evidence, forced me to relive the years of resentment, the sting of betrayal, and the gnawing obsession that had consumed me. Yet, as the judge's words solidified into a legal victory, I felt the weight lift. It wasn't about the money, not entirely. It was about reclaiming my narrative, about proving that their casual disregard for my well-being would not go unpunished. Outside the courthouse, the afternoon sun felt warmer, the air cleaner. My lawyer, a stern but brilliant woman who had seen me through countless emotional breakdowns, offered a rare small smile. "You did it," she said, her voice gentle. I merely nodded, unable to articulate the complex swirl of emotions within me. The victory felt hollow in some ways, a bittersweet triumph. The years I'd lost, the family harmony shattered, the trust irrevocably broken. Those things could never be fully restored, no matter how many legal battles I won. My parents, their faces etched with a mixture of relief and lingering sadness, met me at the car. My mother hugged me tightly, her embrace speaking volumes. "It's over, honey," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. My father, usually stoic, clapped me on the shoulder, a silent acknowledgement of the war we had all endured. They had seen the truth, finally, had witnessed firsthand the depths of Sarah's deceit. The realization had come at a terrible cost, but it had come. The house, the one I'd bought with cash, stood as a silent testament to my independence, my resilience. It wasn't just a building, it was a sanctuary I had built brick by brick, a symbol of everything I had fought for. Driving up the familiar driveway, I saw the for sale sign in Sarah's yard. The bank had foreclosed, a direct consequence of the legal proceedings and her inability to pay. The irony wasn't lost on me. She, who had lived rent-free, who had taken so much, was now left with nothing. Stepping inside my own home, a profound quiet settled over me. The obsession that had driven me for so long, the burning need for justice, had finally extinguished itself. I looked around at the walls I had chosen, the furniture I had picked out, the life I had meticulously built for myself. It was a life free from Sarah's shadow, free from the constant undercurrent of resentment. The phone rang. It was my sister, her voice tentative. Mom and Dad told me about the judgment, she began. There was a pause, a breath held. I'm so sorry all these years. Her voice cracked, genuine remorse finally breaking through. It wasn't a full reconciliation, not yet, but it was a beginning. The family fractured for so long might finally have a chance to heal, piece by painful piece. Looking out the window, I watched the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple. The journey had been long, arduous, and filled with more pain than I ever thought I could bear. I had sought justice, and I had found it, but not in the way I had initially envisioned. It wasn't a triumphant roar of victory, but a quiet, steady peace. The scars remained, a reminder of the battles fought, but they no longer defined me. I had learned that true closure wasn't about revenge, but about reclaiming my own peace, about rebuilding a life on my own terms, free from the echoes of a past that had almost consumed me. And as the last sliver of sun dipped below the horizon, I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I was finally free.